Hey guys, welcome to this edition of Castcast. I'm sorry if I'm a little late. I was kind of looking over just the games, a little bit over the injury report, what some teams are going to be doing in terms of their starting lineups, I guess. And with that, I'm going to start analyzing the games. I think I'll do a quick my Thursday night football reaction. I'm going to say this: the New England with nothing to play for except for maybe pride and to maybe make people think that they're not the worst team in the league, but not much to say about that game. I think that obviously it's hard to turn your offense around after the firing of like a bad offensive coordinator. I still believe that the Matt Canada firing was what they needed to do, but yeah, just crazy to me that, New England scores 3 touchdowns, nothing crazy, but still against one of the top defenses in the league in the Steelers, but pretty crazy, and really bad for the Steelers. I'm sure that they're gonna wanna move on, and I think it's one of those things that, like, Thursday night football games, no matter how much of a doozy it looks like it's gonna be, who knows which team is gonna look fresher, you know? But, moving on, we're gonna move on to the actual games. The first ga the first game that we are gonna look at is the Buccaneers facing their division rival and the Atlanta Falcons in a pretty high stakes game, in my opinion. You obviously have the Tampa Bay, who is second in the division right now, and then you have New Orleans, who has fallen from grace. I remember Cameron Jordan, on the morning show when they had a bye week a couple weeks ago, and they're like, "Oh, all we have to do is keep on winning, and we'll, secure the division title for a playoff spot." But that has, who knows if that has irked or prompted these teams to start winning, because obviously the Falcons have won their last two, one against New Orleans, which I think is huge, and then one against the Jets, which, both teams pretty good defenses. And it's not like obviously they put up a lot of points against the Jets, but the Jets, with a crazy bad offense, uh, you know, and who knows what their answer is going to be week in and week out. Um, for a team now that is likely not looking to the postseason or, even have a shot because of a stacked AFC winning a numerous amount of winning teams. But, looking at this game, they give it to the Buccaneers by a very mild margin, essentially, saying that they'll win by a field goal or that sort of thing. Fade the road team. But yeah, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, obviously visiting Atlanta. Obviously, Tampa Bay just hasn't been, I think, the team that I expected this year. And it just, I mean, they're not very good on the road, so I don't know why they're really giving it to Tampa Bay. The thing that I'll say that is kind of, maybe critical to this game is that the Falcons, are going to rely on the run game because they are starting Desmond Ritter, and Ritter with 8 picks and 8 TDs this season. But the other thing too is that you look at Tampa Bay, they're two stalwart run defenders with Vita Vea right in the middle and then Devin White backing him up. But I really don't think that, Tampa Bay has what they need in order to stop a dominant run game by the Falcons. Even on the flip side, you look at the Falcons and they have a banged up secondary. Okuda and AJ Terrell both banged up. Looking quickly here at the injuries that, they say that they have. You have AJ Terrell was a concussion, so who knows if he'll play. But then you also have Jeff Okudas. It's an ankle injury, which I just don't like. And then you have, Matt Collins also kind of hurt, who, was doing pretty good early in the season, you know. But I think that Drake London has been kind of he's done really well, I think, despite, the bad quarterback play. And I mean, obviously not a spectacular season, but averaging a good amount of yards and, just with subpar QB play, you know. And I think that Bijan Robinson, I think that they need to be able to get him more in space, to be honest with you. But I think that because of the way that Atlanta gets pressure, I think that they're going to be forcing pressure on Baker. And I think that obviously, since they're starting Ritter again, maybe he's started improving in camp and that sort of thing, or he's starting to gain their confidence again, because otherwise, I don't think he would be starting. But I think with, arguably the two best players on the Buccaneers defense, obviously Devin White out, Jamel Dean being out is also pretty big, in my opinion. Even though the passing game isn't crazy for Atlanta, I think that Atlanta wins this game. And I am going to say I don't think they win by much, because I just don't think that you're going to come back and, just light the game up. I think that that's a far thing to ask for Ritter, that he just comes back and he starts to, throw dimes downfield. Even though I think he's capable physically of doing great things, but I just don't like the way he hasn't thrown that many touchdowns. He's got a good amount of weapons, and it's like he has a really well-balanced offense. I think if he even just cut out the turnovers, that this would be, a pretty sneaky team, even though they're 6-6. But they're 6-6 because of, some really bad games, and some games that they just haven't been able to close. But yeah, that's my prediction. I think I'm going to go 7. I think I'm going to go 21-20 as my final score in favor of the Falcons. But moving on, we have Colts versus Bengals. I guess the crazy, freaky thing about this game is that, if you had asked me even before the Bengals played last week, I would have said like, oh, this is a team that, they're ready to give up and look to the postseason, where they're going to try and get Burrow fully healthy and probably improve their offensive line. Because I don't feel like this team has very many gaping holes, to be honest with you. But, their offensive line has just been shoddy for, years now at this point, where it's like they drafted Burrow. The line was bad that his first season. That's why he got, a bad injury. And it's kind of crazy, but you have Browning who comes in, who's like a 2019 draftee, had never heard of him, and he comes in and he starts throwing crazy good, he starts throwing crazy good, balls, and he had a insanely high completion percentage type of thing. And then you have the Colts, who Jonathan Taylor isn't playing. They arguably could still make the playoffs, but there's all these teams that are right around 7-5. I think last week I think going into this week, it's like, 6 teams? I don't want to look it up or anything like that. But essentially, if you're only a couple games over 500, you are scratching for a playoff spot in the AFC. And it would be huge for Bengals. I mean, it might be a long shot, but they could still make the playoffs. And the way that, Browning played, I just, maybe he did a little bit better than he should have type of thing. But obviously the Bengals, and Zach Taylor, their head coach, had a great game plan. And obviously Cincinnati in this division, like they could pass Pittsburgh, obviously, And, this is a team that it's like wasn't far off of being able to win a Super Bowl, and they could be a sneaky, shadowy team. Obviously, the AFC has a lot of shakeup potential because of how many winning teams there are. But, even Cleveland, like, do you trust that Cleveland's going to keep being able to hold on their spot? The only team in this division that I feel like is solidified to where it's like, oh, they're going to make the playoffs, barring some crazy end of year collapse, is Baltimore. Because they are, I mean, in my opinion, are arguably playing the best football. Obviously, you've got the Niners in the NFC, who, when they're hot, they look unbeatable. But I think that Baltimore has the more well-rounded team, and I mean, Brock Purdy's a good quarterback, I think, but you look at Lamar Jackson and all the crazy things that he can do, that he is just so much more of a QB you have to game plan around. I think to beat the Niners, you game plan more around their weapons than Purdy. Because Purdy, while accurate, it's like, I mean, you can collapse the pocket type of thing, but like Baltimore to me is like the team that looks like they, are ready to make a deep playoff run, not even giving up 200 points at this point in the season, which is impressive, and scoring this much more as well, so props to them. But yeah, the Bengals, I mean, the most stacked division in football, honestly, still. I mean, but looking at their injuries, I mean, I guess Tyler Boyd is injured, possibly. You have Cam Taylor-Britt, who's on IR, and some other injuries. DJ Reader, unfortunately, stalwart run defense. But yeah, you look at the Colts, and JT being out is huge. And another of a plethora of other injuries as well to a banged up team. I do think this is the Bengals game. And I don't know what it is, but the Bengals seem to always heat up at the end of the season. I don't know if it has to do with coaching. I don't know if it has to do with philosophy, but even when Burrow was starting at the beginning of the last couple seasons, they did not have good beginning of the seasons. It was insane how, like, oh, this team was a team that's not far removed from a really good Super Bowl game, but they just don't get together until late in the season, which isn't a bad thing. But then you have the possibility that you're going to be not winning your division and scraping for a playoff spot like they are. But yeah, I'm going to go with Cincinnati. I think that Indy can win. I think that Gardner Minshew's played better than people would have expected, where it's like maybe he's trying to make the case to try and go onto a team and be a starter next year. Who knows? Because, I mean, there is a good amount of, teams that look like they might go after another QB, but who knows what the shakeup will be in the offseason. But I'm going with Cincinnati. And I mean, that's only because of how well Browning played in the last game. But yeah, I'm going to go Cincinnati by 7. I think that the Colts defense is also kind of a liability for them, which is kind of crazy considering that you wouldn't think that their offense is like the strength of this team, but I think it is the strength of this team because they've had some games that are really close and super high scoring. And I think that Cincinnati has crazy high score potential with guys like Chase. Mixon has had a subpar year, but he's, still a good running back. And yeah, I'm going to go with Bengals, and I think I'm going to go with Bengals 28-21, honestly. Moving on, we have Jaguars Browns. The Jaguars having lost to the Bengals in a crazy game where it's like, ooh, everyone expected them to win, like it wasn't even close, and I hate to keep saying this story about Jacksonville, but to me, and I mean, obviously Lawrence had like his injury. Is he out? Let me check real quick. They don't say anything here. Let me look quick at. So Trevor Lawrence with his ankle is questionable. Even ETN has a ribs injury. That's questionable, but to me, it's like, this is the game where the Browns And I mean, they obviously have Amari Cooper and Denzel Ward, two big names that are questionable on their team as well. Amari Cooper's a concussion ribs, and then, Denzel Ward is a shoulder injury, which is kind of hard to play through. But I think that here, let me look at the depth chart real quick for them and see. I'm pretty sure that they're starting Flacco, and I'm not gonna lie. While I'm not a huge Flacco fan, I I think that, and yeah, they are starting Flacco over Dorian Thompson Robinson. I do actually feel like even when Flacco played last year at the beginning of the year for the Jets, and obviously he has like no mobility and he was behind with the worst offensive line, you know, um, he actually played pretty well, and I mean he can see the field really well. I think that he's a big guy. I think he can get it to Njoku and he can get it to Cooper. I'm pretty sure Cooper will play unless he doesn't clear concussion protocol. But the main thing with this game that I see being a problem is that I think that Jacksonville isn't going to be able to protect Lawrence if his ankle injury, which it looked pretty bad, he's not going to be able to get away from Myles Garrett. And I think that, the Jacksonville, their woes are going to continue. And I think that this is their game that they lose and go to 5-1 on the away, which is just bizarre. They can't play at home apparently, in 5 of their wins. They're, 3-4 at home with 5-0 on away. But yeah, Cleveland going to their stadium, I just, and the other thing too is that Cleveland, they're another team that's like on the hot seat. The Jaguars aren't on the hot seat as much, I feel like, which could change, this week potentially. With the way that Houston is playing, Houston could, become the division leader. Indianapolis maybe, but I think that Houston, while they're a young team, rookie head coach, I think that they have shown the promise to be really, really good. And CJ Stroud is obviously having a historical year. But yeah, Cleveland, I mean, it's an AFC game, and all of these games are super high pressure if you aren't a division leader. And it's like Jacksonville obviously can, they sense the pressure, I'm sure, from, the other two teams in their, division. Goodness, I'm sorry, the Colts and the Texans. But, you know, this is, I think, going to be a tough game for them, and I think that they lose. So I'm going to pick Cleveland, and I think I'm going to pick Cleveland winning by like 7 because I just don't trust Jacksonville's offense, to be honest with you. It's too inconsistent, even though I think that they have plenty of weapons. And I think that, Christian Kirk, obviously, he's been doing a lot this year. He's been doing really, really well, and I really like Christian Kirk. But I don't know what to say other than that I think that they're going to be overwhelmed by the pass rush and that Lawrence is going to be feeling uneasy all of the game. So yeah, Cleveland by 7. I'm going to say 28-21. Could even be worse than that in my opinion. And I think that, Flacco's going to play it smart. I don't think they're going to make him throw it like a crap ton of times either. Texans versus the Jets. At this point, it's safe to assume that the Jets are not going to be able to make the playoffs. It doesn't matter if, you have, Rodgers coming back. Your record is just crazy. You'd have to win out to even have a shot in the AFC, in my opinion, because then you're 9-8 at the end of the season. And you just lost a game that, like, if you were trying to win out, you lost a game against the Falcons that, like, that was the game, the easiest game in this stretch, in my opinion, that you would have needed to win, you know. But you got the Texans who just beat Denver really soundly. And I mean, they did just lose, to Jacksonville, unfortunately, but and not that the rest of these teams are very good, but I mean, people praise Denver. I wasn't really ever on the Denver bandwagon of that, like, oh yeah, they're the hottest team because they have the longest streak type of thing. Um, Looking at this game, You've got Brace Hall questionable. John Franklin Myers questionable, huge for their pass rush. And I mean, looking at the Texans, they don't really have, to me, anybody like super major that is injured, And to me, it's like, you're going up against a Jets team that lost to the Falcons, and they're just not very good this year. And I fully expect the Texans to have a good game. I expect Richardson to be getting to whoever is going to be the Jets starting quarterback. Let me see really quick with the Jets, like who they say is starting, because all this Zach Wilson it says that they're starting Wilson, and then Trevor Siemian and Brett Rippin are, the backups. But yeah, you have Brees Hall, Dalvin Cook, and then you still have Garrett Wilson. But to me, like, if the offense hasn't worked at this point, because I feel like they just can't get any protection for anybody who's back there, it doesn't matter who's at quarterback. It is not going to matter. Like, if they end up on the ground all the time, it's like it's just a different face with a different name at the end of the day. So I'm gonna say Texans, and I think the Texans put on a day. I think that CJ Stroud actually rises to the occasion against good defenses, to be honest with you. And I mean, Denver, their defense has definitely been playing better, but to score 22 when they were so hot is crazy. And I mean, they've been putting up, I mean, look at these numbers. I don't even care that Tampa Bay doesn't have the defense they once had, but 39 against Tampa Bay is crazy. Even Cincinnati 30 is crazy. And, even when they lose, they put up points, but over 20 for 5 straight games, over 21 and over for 5 straight games. I think that they're going to put the pedal to the metal this game and really take advantage of a Jets team that is struggling and has really bad, the locker room has to be getting pretty bad there. And I just don't know how Salah's going to manage it, because there's just like this team offensively seems defeated. Like there's no reason to play. But yeah, so I'm going to go with Texans, and I'm going to go with them, over 10 over. I don't know how this says it's going to be a close game, in all honesty. But yeah, I'm going to go with them 10 over, and I think it's going to be like 28. I mean, maybe even more. I'm going to predict actually 28-13 is my score for this game. With Texans favored, of course. Looking at the next game, we have Rams-Ravens. Now, the Rams were just ousted out of the 7th seed for, the 7th seed in the NFC by my Packers, of course, who hold the tiebreaker because we beat the Rams earlier this season. And I kind of expect the same, where they're not going to do very well against a very good Baltimore team, who, they just played really well against, I guess, the other LA team. And they won 20-10. And the only reason why I say this is pretty impressive is the fact that since Herbert has entered the league, they've had the highest scoring offense. Since his arrival, and they've had, the worst points allowed defense, which is what been the prime thing for their struggle. So when they're held to 10 points, Baltimore is doing something right, and then you have the Rams, who it was crazy to me how they beat Cleveland, to be honest with you. And I didn't think that they had a shot in hell that game, because I thought that, Stafford was going to come back, and Stafford was going to get annihilated, because they have had a consistency at the O-line this year, but they don't really have, a great O-line, in my opinion, the Rams. They obviously lost Whitworth, who was, their cornerstone, lineman, but they I think that they outperform themselves against Cleveland, which is just, I mean, that doesn't happen every week. But Baltimore, I think, is playing really well. I think, I don't think that the Rams defense, you're gonna have Lamar Jackson easily escaping outside. I mean, even a guy like Aaron Donald, it's like he's not gonna prove very effective, honestly, I think, against Lamar Jackson, because Lamar Jackson's mobility is just such an issue for every single team. And when you spy him, he scrambles out. He finally has a guy who's really reliable in Zay Flowers, and even Odell Beckham, has been playing well, and I think he's healthy now. They obviously don't show him on here, but let me look quickly at, I guess, the injury report for this game. So the Rams, they must be higher up here. Yeah, Tyler Higbee is doubtful, which is huge. Higbee's a very good tight end, and he has been for a while. The Ravens, yeah, the only injuries they have are Malik Ham, Malik Harrison, Demarion Williams, and to me, those aren't even like the key focal players. Not to diminish their role or anything, but the Ravens are very healthy, right now, and while the Rams are pretty healthy, this game could potentially, I mean, be like an outlier sort of game to me. But I think that, Baltimore, they're going to come in here and they're going to get things done. They're going to try and get to 10-3 because they're trying to compete. They're still trying to compete for the AFC first seed, in my opinion, where it's like, they could win it, and they obviously just played a really good offense and, held them in check. But I think that, and I mean, I definitely don't think that Stafford is as good as Herbert is at all at this point in his career. But yeah, I think the Ravens come away with this game. I'm not going to say by a huge margin, but I do think they win this game by 4. I think that it's going to be a game where they're going to score 24 and the Rams score 21. I guess I said by 4, but I mean more by 3, I guess. Or 20 the Rams score, because I just don't, I like their players and I like what they've done this year for having such a bad year last year, but I don't like them against top elite tier teams like the Ravens. And clearly Cleveland is still one of those where they have offensive woes, which is why they lost last week. Where I don't think the Ravens quite have the same kind of issues as the Browns do. Moving on, we have Lions against the Bears. This is a game where the Lions, I think, are going to come out and they're going to win. They obviously just beat New Orleans. What's supposed to be a pretty good defense, and they score 33. It really looked like, to me, the Lions, they finally came back alive after struggling against Green Bay on Thanksgiving. And I mean, that game could have very well been like an outlier, but it's like when it's a divisional game, I think that there's always that kind of spark and that sort of revenge game where it's like the Packers were handled by the Lions earlier in the year, and then we turn around and we handle them, which seems to be kind of a narrative for the Packers. Because even last year, the Vikings, clobbered us week 1, made us look like, oh yeah, there's no way the Packers are doing anything this year. And obviously we didn't do anything, but it came back and slapped the Vikings later in the year. Now, the Bears have been, kind of impressing me the way that they've been playing. They beat Minnesota in a really tight game on the 27th. And, a game that it's like, oh, are they really going to be able to compete against the Vikings team that was pretty hot at the time? They had lost against Denver, but, the Vikings were playing without Jefferson. And, Dobbs obviously just doesn't look like the answer. But, like, Chicago, you wonder if they're tanking for a good pick or what's going on with them. I really wouldn't be surprised if they, do tank. I mean, funny enough, they're not eliminated from the playoffs because they're in the NFC. But it's like you pretty much would have to win out to even have a shot in the NFC with with 9 wins. But I think the Lions are going to go into Soldier Field and they're going to show that they can score on this Bears defense. I think it is troubling that they don't have Frank right now as their center, and I think Alan McNeil has done a really good job at D tackle when he was playing, but I really don't trust him. And of course, Yannick Ngakoue, who they brought in to be one of their pass rushers, and Equanimeous St. Brown being out isn't huge, but the Bears pretty healthy, but I still don't really trust their O-line against a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, I guess. I don't think that their O-line is as bad as it was years ago, but I still don't think it's, where it needs to be in order to protect their quarterback. And I mean, while you have Fields playing, he hasn't, really proven to me that he's the guy that they're going to go with next year. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the Bears in the offseason. But yeah, I'm going to go with Detroit. I'm going to go with Detroit by 14, actually. And I'm going to say that they could score 35 in this game. And the Bears scoring 21, to me isn't too far-fetched. What I've said about Detroit is what I've said like all season. Their defense can be really, really shoddy. And it's not like the Bears have had no offense this year. DJ Moore has had some games where he's destroyed. And, there have been games where it's like, Fields, runs really well. And I think he could do that against the Lions. But he is just a very mobile quarterback. I think second only to really Lamar Jackson in the league this year, in all honesty. But yeah, Detroit Lions probably a blowout is what I'm predicting. Moving on, we have Panthers Saints. The Panthers, I have no reason to believe that they beat this team. New Orleans, a few weeks ago, head of the division, they're like, oh, if we just win, and keep winning, we're going to do fine. Obviously, this team, being a division matchup, they met earlier this year. That game really, it was kind of interesting, but, Cameron Jordan got mad at the defense for even giving up kind of a play that they quit playing because of, why can't I remember his name? The rookie Carolina Panthers QB. I feel there's so many QB names going through my head, but Bryce Young, that's right. I had it on the tip of my tongue, literally. But the thing about Bryce Young to me is that like he doesn't really have that good of an O line, and they are pretty banged up in the O line category. But it's like the thing that's crazy to me is that this defense has underperformed. Like I think that they really have. I think that they really have they really have like a good, secondary and, some good young players, playing up front like Derek Brown and Brian Burns. But it's like, I don't know what's wrong with them, to be honest with you. And I mean, they do have a decent amount of injuries and whatever else, but it's like, it seems like they've taken a big step back. And New Orleans has had some games where they've really scored big, in their games. And I mean, they list Derek Carr as questionable here, but I'm assuming that he plays. Same with Cameron Jordan. And Michael Thomas now is on IR, but probably for the best. Like he honestly, with what he did on like his property or whatever, probably was becoming a locker room distraction, even though he was playing well this year. But I fully expect New Orleans to win this game. I think Chris Olave is going to destroy the Panthers, to be honest with you. I don't think they're going to be able to defend him. And he has just looked like he's really tried to better his game, from last year, which he came in and he was, a good prospect. And he's put in the work to be, potentially make himself look like he was a great prospect with good work ethic and all of that. And you know that Derek Carr is going to try and get him the ball. He doesn't mind a little bit risk with who he throws to. So Olave is going to get his targets. And I think that Kamara has had kind of a slow resurgence since he's come back, but still a dangerous guy. So yeah, I think I'm gonna call this game New Orleans, and I don't think that they're gonna score a lot, to be honest, because it just doesn't seem like their team's designed for that. Really, it hasn't happened that much this year. But I'm gonna go with them by 6, and I'm gonna say 23-17 final score in favor of the Saints at home in a game that they have to win, or they might as well kiss the playoffs goodbye, probably, in all honesty. They lose to a 1-11 Panthers team. Moving on, we have Vikings Raiders, an interesting game due to the fact that the Vikings are visiting Vegas. They are holding a playoff spot, and it's kind of interesting to me because obviously Dobbs is starting again. They didn't play well against the Bears. And of course you had the Raiders who played Kansas City and they were able to, not really put up a good amount of points, but it's like when you're a team like the Raiders who it's like, oh, where is our consistency? What is our offense? That has struggled all year essentially, and they've played two tough teams. Maybe you get to the Vikings and you start thinking like, we're not playing for a playoff spot more than likely, but I still think that they're going to come out and they're going to play. I don't think that they're the type of team that's going to roll over. I think that they're also trying to evaluate their QB. I forget his name. There's all these, QB names of guys that we haven't. Aiden O'Connell, that's right. Who they benched Garoppolo for, and he looked like he could have, had flashes type of thing. And, this team obviously had, and it was a while ago now, but the whole McDaniels like issue where he lost the locker room and he got fired. Same with the GM. But, these players have reason to play. And I also think that Devontae Adams, knowing the Vikings, I think that he, could potentially have like a big game. They give such a big margin to the Vikings, which is surprising to me, in all honesty. And it's like, yes, Justin Jefferson's is coming back this week, but you never know with an injury like his whether he's going to come back. He's going to be full strength. He, even in the interviews, he was saying on how it's like, I feel like I'm good to go. But then he's like, my stamina really isn't there. And it's like, if you don't have enough stamina to really make it through a game, you're not really going to be probably making the crazy plays, or you're going to be on a limited rep count. And when you do come in, it's going to be very obvious and they're going to scheme for it, which I'm sure they're going to do. And the thing about the Vikings is that they do have a pretty good O-line. But Max Crosby, I think, he's an anomaly player where it's like, I don't care who's defending him, his work ethic, his explosiveness, and how he plays, like, he's gonna always affect the game. So, they say this huge margin by the Vikings. I do think the Vikings win this game because they can definitely limit what the Raiders do in terms of pass rush because they have a pretty good run game, you know? And with that, that they're probably going to win, to be honest with you. But yeah, Madison and Addison have been, playing really well, in my opinion, without Jefferson in. And you do have KJ Osborne is fully healthy. So this team is fully healthy for the most part on offense. Obviously, you don't have Cam Akers or Kirk Cousins, unfortunately, but I think that at this point, this is kind of the healthy side of the team because you knew Kirk Cousins wasn't going to be back this year with how late his Achilles injury was. But you know, I also think that Danielle Hunter might get after O'Connell. He's been having a great year. And, the thing about the Raiders is that their offensive line was pretty sketch early, which is why they weren't running well with Josh Jacobs. I wouldn't say that that's completely changed at all. Like you look at Jacobs and it's like, he's going to have like a 1,000-yard season, but compared to what he did last year, that seems like a uh, very big setback to how well your team was able to run it and, that sort of thing. So I'm looking at this game and I'm gonna go with the Vikings, but I'm gonna say the Vikings by 3 because I really don't think they're the type of team to. And they show this as the chance to win, but they do show this, and this is not what I'm going by the way. But yeah, I say Vikings by 3. I think it's gonna be a low scoring game to be honest with you, with a lot of punts because of Crosby and Hunter. So I think it's going to be like a 17-14 game, in all honesty, in favor of the Vikings, who they obviously kind of have to feel a little bit of pressure. They have to feel a little bit of pressure, with, being 6-6, being bottom of the line for wild cards. Seahawks versus the 49ers. I'm sorry, Seahawks, but you guys are kind of doomed. I kind of knew this just based on how difficult your schedule was after the Rams. Like this is the third of like 5 hard games for the Seahawks. And obviously San Fran creamed them, just absolutely destroyed them, not long ago. And then they played Dallas, who they played really well against, surprisingly, offensively, but defensively, it looked ridiculous. They may very well bounce back from this defensively. And if they can somehow find a way to have 2 big games offensively, this could be a game. But I really just don't see that happening. You have San Fran, who, cream them, kind of has their number, to be honest with you. And I guarantee you that they're just going to be coming after them. And it's like looking at the Niners and looking at this, the only person that's out that is, pretty huge is Eric Armstead. But they kind of rectified this when they got Chase Young. So they have Chase Young and Nick Bosa, reunited, and they've been causing havoc. And I just don't see the Seahawks giving as good a protection against them, but it's like, who knows? It seems like whenever it's this crazy of a lopsided victory, that it's like, is this really gonna be how it plays out? Are the Seahawks really just gonna keel over? And it's like, the defense being young, spunky, and all of that. I really and pretty talented. I just don't think that they're gonna keel over. And they do match up well against the Niners. Like I'm not saying that Debo and Ayuk can both be covered. I think that Jamal Adams, is kind of a shadow of what he once was, but I think that he can, kind of give Kittle a little bit of difficulties where he's not going to light you up. Obviously, you have McCaffrey. McCaffrey to me is just utilized so well that it's like it's just gotta be a physical game. And after last week, if Geno Smith continues to play like that, I do think that they have to give him like another year. But with how many weapons that they have, type of thing, I just he needs to keep on proving it. And this is kind of a week where it's like, I mean, if he shows that he can go toe to toe at least, even in a loss against the Niners, who are the hottest team fully healthy, which I've been saying all year, they have the most talent, and it's like, and all of that. But looking at Seattle, Geno Smith, questionable with his injury, which I don't think really matters too much, to be honest with you. He's not really mobile. So him with a minor injury, they just have to be able to protect him. But yeah, Kenneth Walker is coming back. He's questionable. Same with Zach Charbonnet is questionable. But I think that this team, has just too much talent. I think that their weakest, wide receiver threat in their starting is Noah Fant. And then you have JSN, Lockett, and Metcalf. And even Noah Fant, it's like, good big play potential, to be honest with you. And maybe this line just does play well again, this week. Who knows? Maybe they can ride kind of the momentum they had of being able to protect Geno and he can get balls out. And he was throwing some pretty beautiful balls against the Cowboys, a Cowboys team where it's like, Micah Parsons and then Deron Bland, who's just been a pick machine, obviously setting records in his rookie year. But I think this game is going to be a lot closer than anyone's going to give it credit for. They say San Fran by, 14 or 13 points, which is, probably really possible, but the Seahawks defense, I don't feel like is going to kind of keel over like Philadelphia's did. I do not know what was wrong with Philadelphia's defense, but their defense, they just looked flat last week, when they played the Niners. And I mean, the Niners are just going to be a team that they're going to blow by you. Like, I mean, even when Debo caught it and ran, like, Debo's got decent speed, but he's not like Tyreek Hill or something where he's going to be doing that consistently. They just look gassed. And who knows? I mean, sometimes it is hard to keep on winning. Like, eventually it just catches up to you physically, but Seattle, after, a game against Dallas that they had, a game that they honestly could have won, in all honesty. Some people were like, oh, the refs really affected the game, which, don't get me wrong, I know about that. Obviously, my Packers came on the right side of flags or no calls or whatever you want to say on it, even though a personal foul type of thing. But it's like, the Seahawks, are a team that could match up well against San Fran in these division games. I feel like when teams are like this, that have just such a history, who the heck knows what's going to happen, in all honesty. I'll even say that. But I'm going to go with the Niners, but I'm only going to go by them by like 4 points. I think they win by 4 because I think a team, they're going to like end up kicking a field goal and then the Niners might end up scoring and closing the game that way when they could potentially be tied. But I do think that it has the potential to be moderately high scoring. I think that the game's going to be 24-27 in favor of San Fran. Moving on, we have Bills Chiefs. The Bills, a team that many would be like, oh, they should be able to get into the playoffs, but the Chiefs, it sucks, but Isaiah Pacheco is out with an injury, which I'm not going to lie, he was the one bright spot that you could always count on their team. Looking at this game, I think it's, and these two teams haven't played up to what they're capable of. Obviously the Chiefs, having lost against Green Bay on Sunday night, this week, and that sort of thing, and having lost also to Philadelphia and then Denver in their last 5, the Bills were able to go toe to toe and have obviously had their bye last week, so they're very refreshed. I think that that is also going to give them somewhat of an advantage, because they kind of just, Josh Allen just saw, Jordan Love essentially play a really good game. Maybe a little bit of luck going along with it, but a really good game against what was arguably the strength of the Kansas City team and their defense. And with Isaiah Pacheco being out, it's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Because Isaiah Pacheco has a shoulder injury. And you have Donovan Smith, who is also not playing, but he didn't play the later half of last week's game because his neck injury has been like a real issue this year. And you look at the Bills, Kaiir Elam being out kind of sucks, or questionable, sorry. And then Dawson Knox being questionable isn't huge to me, but he is their most solidified. He is their most solidified tight end. I feel like, the Buffalo Bills do have. They obviously drafted. They obviously drafted Kincaid. You know, but they also, this team was a team that they really, oh, and you know what? I'm looking at this, and they actually have Dawson Knox on the IR. Okay, I don't know why I was looking at the depth. Okay, at this injury report that said he was questionable. All right, this is, that's kind of bizarre. I was literally just trolling. I didn't look at this at all, but yeah, I think this is a game the Bills can take away from Kansas City. And not to say Kansas City's really in danger of their division spot, but they could potentially be moving down and be like the fourth division leader with like the lowest win record potentially. They're neck and neck right now, kind of with Jacksonville, who could have taken the number one spot. But the AFC, I mean, the crazy thing about it is that it's just so tightly knit. I think that Kansas City is going to make the playoffs. I don't think that they lose out, to be honest with you. That would be kind of mind boggling, to be honest with you, to not see Kansas City in the playoffs if they happen to lose out and some other teams overtook them. But it's like, I also just think that in their division, like you have Denver at 6-6, who just suffered a loss at the Texans. They could potentially come in, and play, but in the playoffs. But it's like, I mean, after last week, where it's like, oh yeah, people were talking really big about, Russell Wilson, and then he throws 3 picks and they barely lose the game. But looking at this game, and I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna go look at the Chiefs, and what their offense is gonna look like now. They have Mahomes, of course. Pacheco's out. That means that they're going to rely on Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon, who just aren't your typical running backs. I don't think that Edwards-Helaire really has the tenacity to run it between the gaps, to be honest with you. Like, he just doesn't have that feistiness that Pacheco has. And Jerick McKinnon is a very, smart and knowledgeable back, which is why I think that he's, still on a team, and he's, has a good support role, but you're looking at the wide receiver core, you have Rashee Rice, Watson, and Sky Moore, and MVS, and Kadarius Toney, as your main guys, and then Richie James is like your 6th wide receiver. I just, and the drop issues with almost every single wide receiver. You obviously have, Travis Kelce, but even he's had drop passes. And then you have, Donovan Smith, who you brought in because he was a really good, he's a really good veteran tackle, but he's had his issues and he's not going to play. So, Mahomes' protection is going to be kind of questionable. And, Nick Bolton does come back this week, which is huge. I think that the Bills have been kind of a sneaky running team where it's like, James Cook has been showing that he has, good ability, this year in flashes, and that they just gotta really, to me, they just really have to they really have to, show that he can do things game in and game out. But this game to me is like the hardest to predict. In all honesty, this week, I think the Bills know that they should be in the playoffs, but they've just had like a rough year where it's like, Josh Allen has had some really abysmal games. He's obviously still throwing the ball pretty well when he's not throwing picks. And then Mahomes, even with all the struggles and whatever else, it's like, goodness, it's been a mind-boggling year. And I mean, obviously you have Stephon Diggs. I think Stephon Diggs, is going to be a big factor, if the Packers, wide receivers could find ways to get open and that sort of thing. But I think they're going to focus on Diggs more. But I think that with the Bills being well rested, not very injured and very, very healthy, I think that they do win this game against the Kansas City Chiefs, team that is they're struggling a lot. And I just don't even know what point total I'm gonna even go with. I think that this becomes potentially a high scoring game, but it also could be a really bad game for the Chiefs, exploiting their offense more if there's a lot more drop passes. But I think the conservative score I'm gonna go with is I'm gonna go with Buffalo scoring 28 and to the 24 to the Chiefs. 24 could even be 27, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's my prediction for this game. I think a very huge game, for both these teams in terms of like morale and how they finish the season, to be honest. Broncos versus the Chargers. They favor the Chargers in this game. I think it's kind of cool in a sense that they're doing that, because I think that the Chiefs, they obviously just played and I mean they just played New England, who they had like their lowest scoring game probably since Herbert's been drafted, 6 points. And then you have the Broncos who, they lost by 5 against Houston. And you had, Russell Wilson just not play well in that game. He had 3 picks, and it's like he had 4 the rest of the year. Even though I'll say that some of the balls that he's thrown have been just kind of ugly and out of bounds throws where it's like, I think that Courtland Sutton has really been carrying him. I think that looking at the Chargers, you obviously have a couple of guys out, and then you have Joshua Palmer on IR, the wide receiver that they drafted. Let me see here and looking at the full injury report for this game. You have your wide receivers healthy for the Chargers, which I think it's any tough task to have to go up against Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, as well as Eckler, who obviously, the Chargers don't really lean on the running game at all. Obviously, looking at this, it's like, yeah, they don't really run it all too much. But, Herbert, I think, after having kind of a down game against New England where they won, I think they can come away with a win here, as he will more than likely, to me, carve up this Denver defense that I just don't expect them to be able to defend all these weapons, and the offense finally, being fully healthy around Herbert. And, not to say that, they're really playing for a playoff spot, but it's like I said before, Kansas City has looked very rocky in this division, very different than what we thought we were going to get the next 2 years after, last year when before the season, this is going to be the toughest division in football, which it's a tough division. Don't get me wrong. I think that there's no team is completely bad in this division, but still holes on these teams and things that are holding them back from being great. But I think that, I think that Herbert's the second best quarterback in this division easily. I really wouldn't argue with it over whether Russell Wilson's better than him, to be honest with you. Um, I think that Russell Wilson benefits from having a defense that is now playing like, you're not even up to its potential. They're not even playing as well as they did last year. But Herbert's had, virtually no defense. Very sparingly do they show up and play and not give up a lot of points. But I think this is going to be one of those games. I think that them being healthy, them coming away with a win last week, whereas, the Broncos a tough loss where it's like you wonder, oh man, hottest, and then they go up against a team like the Texans that just really expose them. I think that the Chargers win by 7 in this game. I think that they score like 28 or even 35 potentially, and the Broncos can't keep up and they score like 24 because they are going up against the Chargers defense that has been deficient for years now. Eagles, Cowboys. A lot of people, have been saying that, oh, Dak, should be in the MVP talk, type of thing. And it's like, oh, he's been playing really, really well this year. But it's like, you look at the teams they've played. And it's like all of the wins that they have gotten have been against like losing and subpar teams. These 3 games against, I'll say it, 3 bad teams that are not performing. Like the best team out of these 3 is Washington, and Washington got ran over. And then, you do have Seattle, who it's like, maybe you were gifted that game in a way. But, the thing about this game to me is that you have the rematch, and for whatever reason, they're given high win probability to the Cowboys. But I think that the Eagles had a very humbling loss against a team that is way better than the Cowboys. Very similar, where they have, star-studded pass rush. They have, pretty good weapons. They have, and that sort of thing. But they do it better than the Cowboys do. And it's like the Cowboys, to me, it's like if they used Pollard the right way, he could, maybe replicate to some degree what McCaffrey does, but they don't use Pollard well. And Pollard looks like he's been struggling this year, having been the primary option. And the thing about it is that like, Philadelphia, I just don't see them being a team that is going to get rolled over twice. This may be a close game, but I think Philadelphia bounces back and they show why they should be at the top of this division, against Dallas, who have had easy games, have been just running them over. But, unless Dak shows me that he's going to come out and he's going to play well against a winning team, I just don't trust it. I do not trust it. And I think that because the Cowboys have had a very, kind of porous run defense where it's like, oh, they've gotten exposed sometimes this year, not even against the best rushing attacks, in my opinion. But I think that they are set to have, a team run them over. And I think that, DeAndre Swift looks like he's found a place where he could be for a long time potentially with the way he's played. And, even with Hurts, it's like I think that Hurts, is, going to be able to like run on them and create time and get good protection because their whole line is still one of the best. And don't get me wrong, Micah Parsons is a freak, but he's also one man. Excuse me. But I think that Philadelphia wins this game. I do not care about how this, the ESPN analytics is saying that the Cowboys have a 65% shot. Yeah, they're riding a fat wave of wins, But like I said, it's against teams that just aren't very good. And you look at the Eagles and you look at their games, you know, they've beat teams that are sound in their last 5. And yeah, they had a game against San Fran that was not, good at all, but San Fran finally came back healthy and it's like Shanahan got all his toys back to annihilate them with, and they just looked fatigued. And this week that their coach is going to have them prepared. And I personally think that, like, people say McCarthy's having a good job play calling and that sort of thing, but it's like he passes way too much in my opinion, and it's going to catch up to him when teams realize that it's like, "Oh, we don't have to play the run." And we can get Dak to resort to his old ways cuz he's had some games this year where it's like, "Oh, you shouldn't have thrown this pick here and there." That's my honest opinion that, like, yeah, they've played a bunch of mediocre teams. The Cowboys haven't had a tough schedule, whereas the Eagles have had a pretty, respectable schedule this year. And I mean, I get it, you should show up against every team and no game is free in the NFL, but it's like it does take its toll. So I'm going to say Philadelphia, and I'm going to say Philadelphia by 4. And I think they're going to win 28-24 is my score. Moving on, we have the 2 Monday night games. The double Monday night. I don't know why. I guess they decided to do a dual Monday night type of thing. But looking ahead to this game, obviously you look here and a bunch of kind of key players for the Packers questionable. I think they said that Quay didn't practice or something. Devondre Campbell did. Jair did. Elton Jenkins didn't practice. Rashawn Gary, I think, is gonna play. And the thing about it is I mean, this is one of those games that I've heard people speculating that they think that this could be a tough game for the Packers because Saquon could run all over them. But I also think that, like, the offense of the Packers is just going to be able to score a lot more, against they're going to be able to score a lot more than the Giants are going to be able to, and that even if you don't have even if you don't have like per se Rashawn Gary playing, you have Van Ness, who has proved to be able to get pressure, had a sack last week against Mahomes. I think that this could be the game where it's like, oh yeah, he could come in, and if he starts over Gary, should they be like, oh, maybe we just don't play Gary? Which I hardly imagine that they would do completely. He'd probably be on a snap count, but it's like I think that Van Ness could have an insane game because you are going up against arguably one of the bottom O lines in the league that is just, they've given up so many sacks, and obviously Evan Neal isn't even playing. And then you have, Dexter Lawrence is questionable. And I forget, let me check here quick. Who so So for the Packers, they on the injury report, they're gonna update this closer to the game, but they don't list anybody as out. So it means that at the very worst, they're gonna be questionable, like they are on here, unless something happens in practice. Before the Giants, Paris Campbell's questionable. They do list Evan Neal as out, of course. Daniel Bellinger has an illness. Dexter Lawrence has a hammy injury. And then Isaiah Simmons has an ankle injury and he's questionable. But, this is a Giants team that clearly, a lot of struggles, a lot of problems this year. And it's like even Preston Smith, even though he's kind of getting up there in age, has had a, good pass rushing year. And I just don't think that the Giants really have the weapons or the personnel that you want to be able to, like, to be able to play. Like, I think that, I think that, gosh, looking at their team, their tight end is on IR, right? Yep, Darren Waller is still on IR. They have, Darius Slayton, Wandale Robinson, and Jalen Hyatt are their starting wide receivers, and then Tommy DeVito, you know, interestingly enough, is their starting quarterback. Who had heard of this guy? And I mean, they did get a win or a couple of wins in their last two games, but I mean, this game against Washington being DeVito's like breakout game, and then they played New England and they barely won against a team where it's like New England. I mean, there's not much that needs to be said about them. They just stink this year, barring even the fact that they won against the Steelers. But us Packers were obviously on a 3-game win streak. Our last loss being against Pittsburgh, a game that arguably should have been able to win. But yeah, Packers are pretty hot, and we've looked like we've at least found out how to win offensively in these last few games. And the defense has still been playing, pretty respectable. The most points being given up was against Detroit, being 22. So, the defense I think is performing very well. And I think that, we've obviously shown that we can travel well, and our run game has been doing really well. Like, I was honestly surprised at how well AJ Dillon was able to run it against Kansas City, because you got guys like Chris Jones who just blow up runs constantly and make it insanely difficult, and he looked like a non-factor. You do have Dexter Lawrence, who, Sexy Dexy, obviously has like a hammy injury he's hampering, but he's, arguably one of the best inside linemen in the game right now with like the highest PFF grade, and, doing really, really well. But looking at this, looking at the depth chart again, I guess for the Giants, they do have Andrew Thomas. They say he has no injury, but he was not playing well at the beginning of the year. But maybe he returns to form, so they have one reliable tackle. But still, Evan Neal being out, who's ever heard of Tyree Phillips? I'm sorry. But I think that they could have a heyday against Tommy DeVito, and it's like now he's had a couple of games with tape on him, and I feel like the way that, the scrappy mentality of the Packers corners, and especially if Jair and Eric Stokes come back, because Eric Stokes, I think they say, could potentially come back, this week, that I think they took him off of IR. Let me see this. Let me even see what like the defense looks like. But they have, oh, I guess they didn't take Eric Stokes off IR. Never mind. He was practicing though. But yeah, they list literally who they're listing as their, starting, left corner is Jair, right corner Carrington Valentine, and then Corey Ballantyne behind Jair, and Keyshawn Nixon, obviously, who had a big pick against Mahomes. But the defense, pretty healthy. And I mean, I guess on the depth chart, they don't even list Rashawn Gary on there. And they list Quay Walker as doubtful, I guess. But I think against a team like the Giants, who have had so many offensive struggles, I don't think they would mind resting Quay if Devondre Campbell is playing, and he's not listed with any injury, and he's been, really, really solid for us alongside Isaiah McDuffie, who hasn't played terrible when he's had to start this year. Um, but yeah, looking at this, I fully expect, my Packers to be able to kind of continue their ways, and I think that our team is playing with a bit of spunk and kind of like a chip on our shoulder, trying to prove that this offense can be good no matter how young it is. I think with the way the Giants are, I think that this could be, a big spread, bigger than this potentially, but I think that my Packers score 24-13 against the Giants, because I think the Giants, they just, even though they're on a 2-game win streak, I think that they're going to run into a team like the Packers, who we potentially could move up in the seedings this week. Move up into like the 6th seed if the Vikings happen to, lose their game. And I think that our team is going to they're going to keep on riding this wave of confidence. And I guess the other thing that I didn't mention is that Aaron Jones is questionable, but I'm pretty sure, was practicing. He was practicing a lot this week. So if Aaron Jones comes back, I mean, that's just another facet to this offense and another weapon returning to already a good amount of players that have been performing. So, yeah, that's another reason I think the Packers are going to win. But moving on to our last game, we have Titans against the Dolphins. This game, I mean, another game on Monday night. I don't see why. This doesn't even look like it's going to be a special game. I think that, looking at this just tells you all you need to know, and that this was the second highest, I think, point differential. I think there was a 13.5 game, but I think the Dolphins are just going to steamroll the Titans. I think that Will Levis is going to have to learn that he's going to have to be conservative. Not that he's thrown a lot of picks since he took over, obviously, but you're up against a team like Miami with 2 corners that are very experienced and are probably essentially going to take D-Hop out of the game. Like, I really don't think D-Hop is going to go out and ball out against Ramsey, ball out against why can't I remember the other corner for, the Dolphins, but they're pretty stacked on, for corners on the Dolphins. But I still don't think their defense is great. I think that even though they have, these guys, Xavier Howard, but even though they have these guys, their defenses still looked shaky. It's still the same kind of problem that I have with them last year. And, I guess Tyreek Hill being questionable with an injury isn't good. I still don't think they need him to beat the Titans. I think that Raheem Mostert and, Jalen Waddle and, can still, just take over the game and, expose the Titans. So it's like, Christian Fulton is, kind of their serviceable young cornerback who I just don't think would be able to defend them that well anyway. And, I think that this is another free win for a team that's, the Dolphins could go into the number 1 spot because they haven't been playing that great of teams in their last 5. And I mean, still losing a game against Kansas City, who's been, very shaky this year in terms of how well they close games or win games because of, all these drop passes and that sort of thing. But I just don't see the Dolphins losing. I'm gonna actually call their game by 14, and I'm gonna say they're gonna. Well, no, I'm gonna do more than that. The point spread I think is gonna be bigger than 14. I'm not even gonna bother saying that. I think that they win this game. I think they win this game 31-13 is what I'm gonna say. 7 like whatever that is, 18-point difference. But yeah, I think this is going to be kind of a game that, like, oh yeah, for a Dolphins fan, we're going to enjoy them murdering the Titans. But why it's a second Monday night game is beyond me. Why the league would do this. But that wraps it up for all the game predictions. I know that video is going to be pretty long. Overall, I think some pretty good games this weekend that could potentially, shake things up, especially in the AFC. Excuse me. Especially in the AFC. I think the AFC, obviously, this year has been really stacked. Obviously, there are still some bad teams in there that it's like, oh yeah, who cares? Like the Titans playing the Dolphins, like who cares? But it's going to be an interesting weekend, hopefully, with games tomorrow. If you guys don't have any questions or comments about any of the games, to raise a discussion, I'll open the floor to you. But let me let me hear them. Yeah, if that's it, I'm gonna end the stream there. As always, go Pack Go. Good luck to your team, whoever that may be. But you know, I'll see you guys on Tuesday for Satire Reactions Tuesday.